when we think about what kids are like and their curiosity, they find something that's unfamiliar and they don't know, and they really dive down that rabbit hole. Well, what if we just started to dive down the rabbit hole of AI and just play with it? In play, we know everything isn't going to be perfect. Otherwise, it would be, something more strategic and sophisticated. And that takes all the fun out of it. So I think if we can start to approach AI and how we can use it and how we can take advantage of it from that main basic characteristic of curiosity, I think that's going to alleviate a lot of the freak out feeling that we have of our world is just completely different than what it was just a few years ago.
Welcome to Great Practice, Great Life by Atticus Incorporated. What if you could hang out with successful small and solo law firm attorneys, ask them about their successes and failures, their business strategies and mindset habits, then take an insight or two to guide your own growth in your practice? Each week, Steve Riley shares an in-depth look at how to work less while maintaining high client service standards, reduce your stress levels while growing your income, and find time to make changes when you are time-starved. Steve is a lawyer coach for more than 20 years and a former trial attorney. His goal is to provide strategies to help you balance your lives and grow your practice. Now, here's Steve.
Hi, it's Steve Riley. Welcome to this episode of Great Practice, Great Life. Today, I am thrilled to bring back a well-known thinker in the field of innovation who's going to talk to us about human creativity in the time of artificial intelligence. So everybody, welcome Carla Johnson. So Carla, welcome back.
Thanks, Steve. It's great to be back. It's been a little while. I appreciate you inviting me.
Well, it's great to have you back. I realize it's been a while, but it doesn't mean that you haven't been on my mind, because our community in Atticus, we're really focusing on trying to help lawyers think about, understand, and embrace the use of AI in their practices. And it's a scary thing. Like it's a pretty disruptive change, and a lot of lawyers are a little panicked about it. And I'm like, well, who can I bring in to help them think about this? Because I keep telling the lawyers, it's not that AI will probably replace you, but a lawyer who understands AI probably will replace you. So it's there's a lot of lawyers that are up there that are very freaked, for lack of a better word, and they see themselves at risk in being eliminated. And paralegals, team leaders, a lot of folks are feeling that way. And you are an innovation architect. I'm going to put a link to your bio, a link to all your books below into the episode so people can look at that. But that's predominantly why I've invited you here, is to talk to us about your thinking around innovation, creativity, and AI. So that's the setup. Thanks for being here, and thanks for taking the time to be with us today.
Oh, I'm delighted, Steve. And I always have such a great time because you even challenge me in what I believe and what I think, and seeing the world from a little different perspective, which I think is what creative thinking and innovation is all about.
Well, that's very kind of you. That's very, very kind of you. Thank you. So where would you like to start with this conversation?
I think one of the things, and you and I chatted about this a little bit before we came on the show, is AI is actually something that's been around for quite a while, right?
Yes.
And so this big rush of everything of the trigger that caused everybody to freak out is just that it became more accessible with ChatGPT about 24 months ago, a little over 2 years. And with that, I think it's a really wonderful piece of evidence about change in general. A lot of times change knocks on your door, and it knocks and it knocks and it knocks, and we ignore it. And whether that changes your competition, whether it's the marketplace, whether it's your customer or your client or how they buy or whatever it is, how you recruit people, we ignore it for as long as we possibly can. And then there comes that day where it just slaps us in the face, and we can't ignore it anymore if we intend to stay in business. And I think with AI and the release of ChatGPT, that's probably one of the most powerful things for us to understand about business, and especially AI. It's been around for years, and you said it yourself, like you were talking about this more than a decade ago.
Yes. Yeah. It was probably, I was talking about it, and I was very concerned about it. And I was a little freaked at the time, and my concern was it's only a matter of time before a app of some form can replace a lot of lawyers by a lawyer somebody picking up their phone and saying, hey, look, ChatGPT, I need you to draft this or do that for me. We're seeing some of that already. So I was trying to get lawyers 10, 12 years ago now to get ahead of the curve and focus on innovation, which is the predominant reason I introduced you to our community, the predominant reason I encouraged all of our community members to read your books, and one of the reasons I brought you back, because you do a great job thinking about innovation. So the one thing I do want to quote you on real quick, because a lot of lawyers sometimes, you've said this really well, change, in this case, change didn't knock on the door. I think change kind of kicked the door down, and it's now thrust upon a lot of lawyers. And the lawyers are not really sure about what to do, and they're kind of panicked about it. So the thing is, I would like you to talk about helping us move from kind of the reactive change, the panic about it, because this is one of my favorite quotes by you. Innovation is not about ideas. It's about making ideas happen. And I love that, because you can talk about ideas, you can talk about thinking, you can talk about creativity until you take that idea, make it real, and then have someone actually pay you for that idea. And that idea improves their life in some way, shape, or form. It's just an idea and something fun to talk about, but not something that you can actually apply and use in the marketplace. So talk to me about how you can help my friends, my brothers and sisters at the bar, my team leaders, our community think about, responding to this door being kicked in.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple of different things that I'd like to share. One is just my perspective on innovation. And lots of times we think of innovation as this huge disruptive thing, which ChatGPT and AI now feels like, because we haven't paid attention to it, that it's expensive, it's time consuming, it's completely disruptive. But I think of innovation purely as consistently coming up with new, great, and reliable ideas. When you look at it that way, it doesn't have to be so disruptive. It can actually be quite welcoming. So if we think about what a new idea is, there's McDonald's, when they were looking at how do they revamp their drive-through to make it much more efficient for customers, they looked at how does a Formula One pit crew get the car into the pit stop, do what they need to do, and get it off. So they designed their drive-through layout for their restaurants. I don't know if it's a restaurant really, of their McDonald's stores to mimic that of a Formula One pit stop. So was it a new idea? Well, not exactly, but it was new to the fast food industry.
It's interesting because what you're arguing for is a strategic approach to innovation, cultivating, looking at developing new ideas. I think how most lawyers respond to innovation is it's something where a muse comes in and whispers into their ear this idea that will change the world. But your approach is no, you actually have a process for it. You study it, you look for it, you are open to it, and you have a mindset around it.
And actually, some other industries are some of the best places to go look for ideas and inspiration, things that are completely different from the legal industry. That like McDonald's, who would imagine Formula One and a fast food restaurant have so much in common? But it changed everything about the efficiency of the drive-through process, and then other fast food restaurants copied it. So McDonald's innovated, other companies copied it. So you think about that with your law firm. Do you want to be the one who creates it new, or do you want to be the one who's playing catch up and copying it? And I think that's where a lot of law firms are now with AI. They're trying to figure out what did somebody already do and how do I copy it? The next characteristic of a innovative idea is that it's a great idea. And to be honest, Steve, a great idea is much more subjective. There's an advertising legend, David Ogilvy, who says a great idea is one of those that kind of makes the hair stand up on the back of your neck or, your arms. It gives you goosebumps. And it's such a visceral, emotional feel and it makes you think, I wish I would have thought of that. But even just to have an idea that's a great idea, I think of that as in music, that's more of a one-hit wonder. But if you have a new idea and a great idea, we're getting better. But back to your quote about innovation is about action. The third characteristic is a reliable idea. And a reliable idea is one that has a bottom line impact. And I think that's one thing that we discount when we think about ideas. It's easy to come up with ideas. It's harder to come up with great ideas. That's why I came up with the criteria for a great idea and also help people with the process to come up with a great idea. but it's even harder to come up with a new idea that's great and also reliable that has a financial impact. And even fourth, it's hard to do that on a consistent basis unless you have a framework or a process that's proven to do this. And that's what I've been working on for years. And so as we think about this in the context of AI, okay, here's something that has already come along and it's disrupted. And wherever you are in that AI journey, I kind of think of it as, a range of experience with people with AI, is starting to look at it instead of, a threat or something that's scary. How do we start to turn on our curiosity? Because curiosity is an incredible characteristic of creative people, creative problem solvers, innovative thinkers. And we can't be scared and curious at the same time. And it's a beautiful thing when we start to look at the world from the perspective of asking questions rather than just deciding these are the way that things are and this is how I have to feel in response. And I think by activating that curiosity, when we think about what kids are like and their curiosity, they find something that's unfamiliar and they don't know and they really dive down that rabbit hole. Well, what if we just started to dive down the rabbit hole of AI, of ChatGPT, of Claude, or whatever platform that you use, and just play with it? And we know, like in play, we know everything isn't going to be perfect. Otherwise, it would be, something more strategic and sophisticated. And that takes all the fun out of it. So I think if we can start to approach AI and how we can use it and how we can take advantage of it from that main basic characteristic of curiosity, I think that's going to alleviate a lot of the freak out feeling that we have of our world is just completely different than what it was just a few years ago.
That's fantastic. And I have to tell you, I loved your definition of ideas. That was fantastic because that's one of the great things that you've done. And one of the great things you contribute to our community is you're thinking about how to organize your own definitions and framework around ideas. So a reliable idea is really great because you can ship it.
Yeah, absolutely. Right.
And then backing away from the stress and the seriousness by looking at the play element of, okay, don't panic about this. And you have a term for this in your book. I think you call it applied curiosity.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's really what you're arguing for. It's just be curious, apply the curiosity. Don't freak, don't stress. It's okay. Just play with it a little bit. So it's an interesting and simple approach, I think.
Yeah. And I think when I think about how do we apply curiosity in this case, I think of it in three different ways. One is having time to really sit with the question, because I think we have this natural innate nature to want to rush to the answer, to want to decide what to do. And I think when we do that ourselves a disservice about what's actually possible. But if we can take time to just sit in the question, to look at it from all different directions, when we get together and talk about what's the possibilities with AI, instead of deciding, let's spend those first 30 minutes of a meeting just purely asking questions. And I think that's a beautiful part of curiosity, is that it opens up all of these possibilities. The second one is what we just talked about, is how do we really go down that rabbit hole and really dig into. Now we have these questions. We feel a little bit more loose and maybe a little bit of possibilities. What's one or two that we really want to dig into and see how we can apply it, see how it makes sense for our own law firm? Because a lot of people are doing a lot of things in different ways, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to apply one-to-one to what we do. And maybe there's some things that we can learn what they've done that we can take and tweak and do a little bit differently. And it just creates that exponential outcome in our situation. And then the third thing is I talk about curiosity like swapping hats. Instead of looking at AI and how to apply it as an attorney, what if you looked at how to do it as a Disney character? Or what if you were a NASA scientist? Or what if you were a chef? Swap hats with the most ridiculous possible profession, a cowboy. How would a cowboy use AI? And again, it starts to open up this world of possibilities. And I think when we have that feeling, that emotion of possibilities, that actually releases, dopamine and oxytocin in our brains. And those are the feel-good chemicals. So now all of a sudden we have an actual chemical reaction, emotion associated with AI that makes it less scary when we go to think about it. And whenever anything is less threatening, if we're under pressure, we freeze up. And that's the last part. That's the last way to want to show up in the world if we're wanting to be open to new ideas. So the more that we can swap hats, be ridiculous, be a little silly, and look at the potential, that's bringing that human creativity into the world of AI that really helps us understand, what does this mean for us and how can we apply it in ways that make sense?
Carla, I hate to ruin this for you, but did I mention that this whole podcast is aimed at the legal industry? I'm, I'm,
This is funny, Steve. I talked to a group of lawyers a few years ago in October in Orlando,
yeah.
and it really, and this, like, in all seriousness, the amazing thing that I heard from the attendees at the Atticus Summit afterward was, I now realized that I can be the creative thinker,
Ah,
and I think the word that was most powerful was, I believe I can be that creative thinker. And I think understanding what it takes is so simple that it isn't this big disruptive thing. It is all these little things like sitting with the question, going down the rabbit hole, swapping hats. I think even a lawyer can swap hats and, think like maybe an accountant. I don't want to like push them too far to
yeah,
think
let's
like
not go
a
too
business
far.
person.
Let's not get
Yeah.
crazy. Yeah, so for us, we might be able to swap hats with a different lawyer. So I could maybe
Yeah,
swap
there you
hats
go.
with a criminal law lawyer
It's all
versus a PI
progress.
lawyer, right? So that we might start with small
Baby stepping.
beanie hat swap. I don't
Yeah.
know. So listening to you,
Instead
I'm
of
like,
like a Kentucky Derby hat.
yeah, we can't get too crazy now. I mean, you're pushing your luck with us. I mean, good Lord, the fact that we're having a conversation about creativity and generative AI in itself is nuts. But I didn't mean to take us down a rabbit hole or a different direction. Keep
There you go.
thinking, keep talking, because you're on fire.
I think there's some things with AI that we can use creativity right away. So for everybody who's listening or watching who's used this, you remember when you first tried to work with ChatGPT or an equivalent platform, and you ask it a question and it's like, oh, well, that answer was disappointing. And then you try a couple different ways to ask it or change it, and you're thinking, I'm not really getting what I want out of this. Well, there's a reason that professionals expect one of the highest in demand job titles that are coming up in the next few years is that of a prompt engineer, because AI's outcome is only as good as its input. And so the more we want to use it and the more we want to have it help us, because AI can be an incredible tool for creativity, for productivity, for efficiency, we have to understand how to structure the input that we put into AI. And that's not always linear, strict process that you can follow like we have in the legal profession. This takes some creative thinking, and it takes us connecting some dots in different ways to fuel the input that we put into AI in order to change the output. Now, it doesn't always mean that even when we're more creative as that prompt engineer and with what questions we ask or how we continue to iterate it, that the output will always be perfect. But it does mean whatever that output is, it can save us time getting to that ultimate end creative output. Now, I think about how I've used it. I use it a lot for research. And I know from the legal profession, that can be an interesting conversation about how, about the legalities of using that research. Now, I don't necessarily take that research and publish it because I write so much, but it helps inform me. And then I can go down another rabbit hole of research because it can find things for me quickly that I might never find, or it might take me a lot longer to find. And I do ask for many times when I ask it to do things for me, I ask it to cite sources, which sometimes I think it's better than others. But as a researcher, I think it's helpful. But we have to remember, as creative thinkers, as innovative thinkers, it's not about offloading this to something else to do the work for us. This is just a tool that helps us do what we do. Just like humor is a tool, just like swapping hats is a tool, just like studying other industries is a tool. It's not the answer. It's part of our tools on the journey.
I like that. I like that. The first stage, I think, for myself and other lawyers where we started interacting with like a super Google. Like it's a better Google, but not really as AI. Just, you're using that template of how does a search engine work. But I like the way you're explaining it, because for me, I kind of look at right now as a collaborative lab assistant, someone that I can talk to about a research project or a creative project, and someone that I can just bounce ideas off that I'm not too embarrassed to talk to. Because sometimes, when you're being creative, you have some dumb ideas, and it doesn't mock you too badly, whereas other people might mock me pretty severely. So I'm like, at least I can talk to it for a little bit about creative ideas and see what the feedback is, whether it's good or bad. It's interesting also that how it's exploded in so many different ways and so quickly. And I think because of that, people have not been able to really catch their breath long enough to say, how do I approach this particular tool? How do I integrate this particular tool in my life? So I love your approach. Keep going. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I really love where you're going.
And I am curious about how some of the attorneys that you're talking to, or law firms, how they're using it, because I think that's very interesting for me to swap hats and think like an attorney to use AI.
Well, I'll give you a couple of examples. So when we started our course, Grow with AI, we started it in January and we're 7 months in. The original approach was I took, and literally the sentence or chapter from your book on applied curiosity, which was to try and take the fear out of it. And we had 3 or 4 tremendous thinkers in our community lead the charge. They really led the charge. And because of them being fearless leading the charge, and everybody else kind of jumped in and started playing with it a little bit, I'll give you 3 interesting examples. One is one of our adjunct practice advisors, a coach one of our coaches out of Chicago, phenomenal lawyer by the name of Mark Metzger, did a fantastic class on how to use ChatGPT to summarize depositions and voluminous legal documents like sworn statements, things like that. And he did a hour course basically on how to do that. Now, why that's important, Carla, is a young lawyer, you cut your teeth on how to learn to take depositions, how to learn to organize witness testimony by taking these 400, 500-page depositions, reviewing them, organizing them, doing a notebook around them, and presenting them to a senior partner. That may take you 5 or 6 hours to do. It might take you 5 or 6 days, depending on what the testimony is and what you're working with and who you're reporting to and what you're using the statement for. Mr. Metzger uploaded that and was able to show a summary in under 4 minutes. So everyone was aghast, like blown away. Now, the other element of this is what you referenced before, is the ethics of this. So I believe right now, Florida was the first state that gave ethical guidance. I believe California, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, New York, and I can't think if there's any other states that have actually said if you're a lawyer, you want to take in consideration. And one of the things that the bars appropriately have said is ethically, you can't bill clients for the work that you normally would charge 6 hours for to summarize that deposition would take you 4 minutes. You have to, have to charge appropriately. So you're seeing the not conflict, but you're seeing lawyers trying to figure out how to be ethically appropriate in their profession, along with looking for shortcuts to make things quicker, faster, and cheaper. The second thing is we saw a lawyer by the name, I'll just say Becky right now. I don't want to say her name because her whole name, but she used it in preparation for a jury trial. And so she used ChatGPT to communicate a theme to the jury and used it kind of a research assistant, an organizational assistant, and a artist to create graphic images. And the reason I don't want to talk about the case too much is my understanding is now up on appeal. She won a very hard case in front of a jury, but she used it in that particular way. The area that most lawyers are now using it very comfortably is in marketing, because there's, I think right now, about 4 or 5 cases where lawyers use ChatGPT as a shortcut for legal research. They did not cross-check the work. And it hallucinated. And so in federal court, a case in Canada, a case here in Florida, the lawyer filed briefs legal documents under oath saying that this is, I certify in writing this stuff is true, and this is my, research, etc. And they cited hallucinated cases. And as you can appreciate, the judges were not particularly pleased with that. And all the lawyers have suffered some form of ethical repercussion. So most lawyers are afraid to get too intense with it in a research perspective. However, from a marketing perspective, as a shortcut to create white papers, create content marketing, to create posts, social media posts, to revise agreements, to revise engagement letters, to just make life simpler. One of my favorites was Victor Medina, actually. Victor Medina had ChatGPT do a summary of his legal documents as if it was being explained to a 12-year-old. So he took these complicated legal documents in 2 pages, did this great little story on what these legal documents had meant. And Victor also created his own private ChatGPT for our company, where it's called, Our Great Team, or My Great Team ChatGPT. And it's one just among the Atticus community where we uploaded all of our books, some of the research, some of the stuff that we've done in supporting lawyers with their team. And he's using that. So those are probably 5, 6 quick examples. All that's been done in 6 months, Carla, in 6 to 7 months.
So it's people with the curiosity to dive in and sit and ask, like, what are the possibilities here? And I know I use it a lot for writing in terms of, because I write so much as a writer, not everything comes out perfect the first time. So I get it down, I get it close. It's not unusual for me. I have a chunk of writing that I've done in the past that I really like. I drop that into ChatGPT. I say, summarize this writing style. And then I take the other writing that I've done, drop it into ChatGPT and say, revise this writing to match that previous writing style. So it saves me a whole lot of editing time. I still have to go back and write it and make sure that it sounds like me. Because one of the things I want to make sure is that when people meet me versus read my work, it sounds like the same person. And that's really important to me in my writing. And so having that as a tool helps make that more efficient, more productive. That's an easy use for from a marketing perspective, especially for law firms, when you have a voice and a tone for your audience.
Yeah, it's interesting because the way you say, when you said that, it's one of the things I always liked about your writing style, except for the book you wrote with Robert Rose. That got a little dense. Robert slowed you down.
Too much Robert Rose in it, right?
I mean, Robert slowed you down, I'm just going to say. But the
he has described
innovation
his writing style as Dr. Seuss with too many ellipses. So we came to a common understanding during that book writing.
But your writing style is very conversational, and that's one of the things I like about it. And when you talk about innovation in your book, Rethink Innovation, I feel like I'm having a conversation with you. I'm not being lectured to. I don't feel like it's a PhD from an Ivy League school who's never probably innovated anything in their life telling me how I should think about innovation. So I really appreciate that. And that's a great shortcut. I had not thought about that. I think that's one of the benefits of the group programs that we do is that the collaborative learning. So everybody watches everybody else. And the running joke inside of Atticus is, well, if Steve can do it, anyone can do it.
It's really kind of you to set the bar so low for everybody, Steve.
I know. It's been a running joke for years. Like, well, people look and they go, if Riley can do that, man, I can.
Yeah, anybody could do that.
And I mean, I don't see that so hard. If he can do it, anyone can do it. I mean, this is not so complicated. I mean, so so those are some examples, and those were the ones that just came to my mind. There's probably 5, 6, 7 others that have happened during that course. It's a lot of fun. It's been a lot of fun. I'm trying to think, maybe we could slip you in based on your calendar to have you come lecture a little bit. And I say lecture in a very broad way.
Talk. I am a mom, so I'm a little sensitive about being asked to lecture because I feel like I've really tried to move that part of my personality to the side. It was funny during COVID when I would do virtual presentations. I would get done and my kids would say, "You're using your mom voice too much." And I think, just the change in physical environment creates our emotion, and our emotion creates our action. And it just, the same thing, that the same voice that told my kids to clean my room said, "Think different and swap hats." It wasn't quite the same dynamic that I wanted to have going on. So we'll move it. Well, how about if I come have a conversation with the group? That might come out. That might come out a little bit better.
That might be better. I like that. I like
Yeah.
that.
But one of the things that I also love for AI that I think is really applicable is, especially if you're a law firm that specializes in an industry, is that I use it to build personas and continue to fuel and feed those personas and make them deeper, richer, smarter personas. Then I can ask that persona questions. So a little bit like what you were talking about with asking it questions about your ideas, because luckily ChatGPT doesn't laugh back at us for the things we ask it.
Well, not too much. It's
Not
knocked
too
you
loud, not
once.
too
Not
loud.
too
Yeah.
much.
It's a nice way to create your audience, your target client, and then ask it questions. If you have a new marketing campaign, run it by this persona that you've developed and ask it for its opinion. How would it come across? How would it be perceived? What would be different? What would they like to see? What would they do different? What might be some other interests that could come into this campaign and make your law firm, one, stand out and look different, and two, be creative, interesting, and sound a little bit more human, which I think some attorneys on occasions have been known to sound human. To really, if you're not sure how to dip your toe into some new ways of showing up and distinguishing yourself as a law firm, I think using ChatGPT to build a really, really rich client persona, and then trialing some of your ideas against that persona can be really helpful.
I love it. I love it. Hey, Steve, I want to just kind of jump in the middle of this episode to talk to you for a minute. If you are an Atticus member, or if you're in our audience but not an Atticus member, one of the most impactful things happening in the legal industry, quite frankly worldwide, is the use of generative AI. How is artificial intelligence impacting your practice? So we've started a course called Grow Your Practice with AI. If you're not part of this course and you're a member, jump in. It's included as part of your membership. However, if you're new to Atticus and you're trying to check us out and you're not really sure if it's a good fit for you or not a good fit for you, this is a perfect class for you. Once a month, we get together for 2 hours via Zoom, and we have a fantastic workshop on how to implement AI in your law firm. We have everything from thought leaders that talk about the big picture, how to strategically think about AI. More importantly, we have some fantastic how-to segments that you can immediately start using AI in your practice to do everything from summarizing depositions, to improving correspondence to clients, to improving your marketing. There's so many different ways that AI can help you grow your practice. In addition, we talk about trends. We talk about some of the ethical issues as they come across the US and how they're impacting practices. So if you're not already taking this course, jump in. I put some information in the show notes about it. So I would just encourage you, because if you're not getting behind the use of AI in your practice will be getting behind your competitors. So jump on this. Hope to see you there. Okay, I've got a couple of questions for you, but okay. I don't want to. I know you're under time pressure, and it took us some time to negotiate a slot on your schedule. So one of the things, and I'm going to kind of summarize a few things and then let you comment on it, then I've got a question for you. One of the things that you recommend is to have a mindset where you're actually investing in innovation as part of your workday, work week, and you've given some practical tips. I know this is an unfair question, but if you were, let's pretend we're talking to your brother who probably would never, ever listen to this podcast because it involves lawyers and you.
He gets enough of me.
He gets enough of you. He's probably, no way. If your brother says, hey, look, Carla, you don't understand. I am so busy. I'm working weekends. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. And I got rushed with kids and I get client demands and so-and-so didn't show up for work and I'm chasing cash flow. I'm chasing new clients. I'm chasing this. I'm chasing that. where in the world am I going to find time for innovation? So if you look at an average work week of maybe, let's just say 50 hours, how much time would you encourage a lawyer to apply towards innovation and innovation thinking? And what would that look like on a work week or a work day?
So I'm going to answer it in two ways. The first, like if people said, what's one thing I could do that would help me immediately become more innovative, more creative in my thinking, I would say take a 30-minute nap.
Take a 30-minute nap.
Take a 30-minute nap. And it can be like, if you have a chair in your office, I used to work with architects, and I had an architect that I work with who would lay down in the olden days under her drafting table and take a nap every day after lunch for about 30 minutes. Because coming out of sleep, you're in this brain wave called theta. And theta is that part where you're not quite awake and you're not quite asleep, but that's where great ideas come oftentimes. And so when we do things like go for a walk or take a shower or have a couple of drinks, those are ways that put us into that same sort of creative mindset that waking up from a nap or waking up from a night of sleep, it opens your mind, and all of a sudden ideas will start to pop into your head. So if you wake up during the middle of the night and you're like, oh, I had an amazing idea, that's because your brain was going. And as you pull out of that sleep mode, which is called delta, into theta, your brain takes what it had been thinking about unconsciously without all the constraints of, I got to get the kids to practice on time, and I got to get dinner made, and I got to, get the billing hours in, and I got to get the mortgage paid. It's just processing things. And as it pulls out of that beautiful, relaxed state, it's ripe to come up with ideas. And the really amazing thing is when you take a nap, your brain then starts to connect all of those dots that you think are completely random and disconnected altogether. It organizes them and it makes sense of them. And it's also just the fact of a tired mind is an exhausted mind, which is never a creative mind.
So let's stay there. We'll stay there just for a second, because this is really, but there's two things that I try and do, and I want to get your feedback, because number one is before I work on any creative project, I try and put a good 15 minutes of meditation in. So I try and still my mind if I'm going to do some creative work, because I've noticed that I personally will bring whatever problem I was wrestling with into that creative moment. The second thing is, I've really for about 15, maybe 20, maybe longer than that, Carla. One of the projects, whenever I'm working on a project, the first thing I'll do in the morning is take a book out of the artist way and I will do 3 or 4 pages, handwritten pages, and journaling. So those are the two things. I could never imagine napping during the day, but that's like a radical hat swap idea for me.
Sure, and the two things that you have just done there mimic exactly of taking a nap. So mindfulness, meditation, that's all about slowing down your brain and connecting with your breath and being really, really present. That's another amazing thing to do. Meditation, mindfulness, even just stopping and going, it slows things down. And that physical sensation of a deep inhale, hold it for 1 or 2 seconds, and then exhale for longer than you inhaled, is a signal to your nervous system to relax. So if you think about when we're under pressure, when we're running, we're going, our breath is rapid and it's short and we're just trying to get things going. And if you ever notice when you're under stress, like I notice this just in line to a roller coaster, my breath gets real shallow and I'm going, and when you breathe shallower and shorter and faster, it raises your heartbeat, and that tells your body you're in danger. But when you exhale for a longer period of time than you inhale, so if you inhale for 2 and then exhale for 4, that's telling your brain that things are okay. I have time to breathe. I have time to exhale. I'm safe. But when you're breathing rapidly and you have that shallow breathing and your heart rate's fast, your body's saying, I'm not safe. I can't relax. And you can never be creative, innovative, curious when you're in that state of panic and fear and defense.
Oh my God, that's so awesome. That's great.
It's incredible. And it's such a fascinating, like biomechanic, or, I can't remember all the like neuroscience names for it, but it's just that simple little signal of I have time to take a deep breath, so I'm safe. And even doing that, and then just sitting with a problem for 7 minutes can do wonders for your creative juices. And if we say, but I'm always on the run, I never have that time to do that. You know what? Turn the radio off when you're driving or when you're commuting, like make it silent. And as you're driving, if we're in a hurry, we tend to be going, gotta get there, gotta get there, gotta get there, can be late, can be late. That's putting us on this emotional, physical hamster wheel. But if while we're driving, we take that 2 breaths in, 2 count breath in and 4 count out, it brings down our body and our nervous system. It also makes traffic more easy to deal with. If your kids get in and they're all boisterous and they forgot their homework and they got in trouble at school, or you didn't get groceries for dinner, or whatever it was, it makes all of that easier to deal with. And when we go through our day, even with those little bitty breathing exercises, it shifts how we show up. And all of a sudden, if we're not constantly in this mode of panic and defense and just trying to keep up, then we start to notice these little things that we've previously been blind to. And I know, like when I remember to do this and I get in the car with my kids, all of a sudden they'll say this most random thing that is absolutely brilliant, that gives me an idea. Yeah, I mean, it could be like so totally ridiculous, but because I was in this more calm nervous system state, I heard it. And then that connected with something else I thought. And then that network of dots connecting from everything that I have working on. Then I get that idea for that one thing I've been struggling with that has been so incredibly time consuming that it feels like magic.
This is really practical and simple space for how to be more aware and innovative. So I really appreciate it. I mean, it's very, very practical.
Yeah, but I think about, like, I'm a type A person. And if
I have not noticed this. You think you're type A? You really think so?
If I can learn to like go and like really just reset, it can do it for, it can even help a lawyer. It can even help.
I know. I'm laughing because there's lawyers listening that's going, you don't understand. I don't have time to breathe. Like, I'm just not going to breathe. I just don't breathe.
Yeah. That's on Thursday's agenda, breathing.
Yeah, I have it scheduled for Thursday after a hearing, and then I'll breathe on the way.
When you look at your schedule and you've got 9 things scheduled in the exact same hour, how do you do with it? I mean,
or double book or triple book. Mm-hmm. So here's my next question for you. So I'm gonna pull you into a different direction.
Okay.
I want to talk to you for a few minutes, and this is I don't know if I pulled this quote from you out of your book or when you spoke at the summit, which I'd love to have you back to speak at the summit. And I don't know if I pulled it from the book you wrote with Robert, but when lawyers go to communicate things to their clients, their team, their spouse, to anyone, they usually lead with, I've got this really, really brilliant, innovative idea, and here's what we should do. You've got this great quote, and I'm going to read it word for word. Storytelling is the most powerful way to put ideas into the world. And as someone who is an innovation architect as a job title, someone who's worked with Amazon, someone who's worked with some of the top international companies in the world, why is that an important statement to you?
I'm gonna start to answer with a question to you first.
That's not fair. I asked the question first.
Okay, go ahead. You choose to answer it.
Okay.
Yes or no, it can be an essay. Completely up to you, Steve.
Okay.
Do you remember your first kiss?
My first what?
Kiss. Your first kiss. Like.
That's what I thought you said, my first kiss. Yes, I do.
Yeah. Yes, I do. And so do you have an emotional feeling about that first kiss, right?
I do.
I do. So I remember mine, all chapped lips, sweaty palms kind of thing about it. I was probably, I don't know, 6th or 7th grade, somewhere around there. But I do remember the emotion that came out of it. And I think that's what storytelling does. There's actually research that says we remember our first kiss as a powerful memory because of the emotion it gave out of us, brought forth in us more than some other really significant points in our life. And so when you go back to what are the things that are really powerful that you remember, they had an incredibly strong emotion tied to them. The best stories are emotion-driven stories. So this quote may have come from the book that Robert and I wrote together, because that's what the book was about, how to create these story-driven experiences that create emotions for people, that bring them into a brand and make them feel like they're inside the brand. One of my favorites is the Epic Pass, which if you're in Colorado or if you're a skier, you know the Epic Pass, which is a ski pass that goes to several mountains in Colorado. But when it started out, and Robert and I wrote about it in the book, it's an app. And so it tracks all of your data for your skiing for a day, for a season, for as long as you have that app. And so now you're not just somebody who goes up to, the gates at the ski lift and you scan your pass and you're off. You're now in the world of skiing. So if you want to compete with a world record holder skier, you've got all your stats and you have all your data. I mean, how else do you know how fast you're skiing down a mountain or snowboarding down a mountain? You don't, but now you have your pass with you. That creates that story-driven experience of me as a skier. I happen to be a skier. So now I can compete with my kids. I can compete with my friends. And now it's a whole different experience than just sliding up to that gate and scanning. So it turned from a transaction to an experience. And I have emotions around those experiences. So when we think about when we're wanting to get other people to come together, to create alignment about our ideas, to get excited about ideas, to have belief in the ideas that we want to share, stories are so powerful because alignment and excitement and belief are all driven by emotion. And that's why stories are so incredibly powerful. And there's this quote about, nobody ever does anything because of a pie chart. Nobody ever lost weight because of a pie chart. Nobody ever took care of their health because of a pie chart. Nobody was more productive at work because of a pie chart.
Or an Excel spreadsheet, right?
Yes, exactly. We do these things because of the emotions that are associated with the stories that we tell that have meaning. And that's why stories are so incredibly powerful.
That's awesome. So your recommendation is if you're trying to sell someone on innovation, probably the first thing you need to do is anchor yourself to a story or a story that might open up the door for the conversation around the innovation.
Absolutely. I was talking to a company last week about doing some consulting to help them build their culture around innovation. And so, the first thing they want to talk about is, metrics, revenue. We have things that are due.
Of course.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a very left brain engineering driven organization. And in addition to attorneys, I have PhD engineers and military professionals as siblings. So and here I am, just a hard right in that whole trajectory of thinking from my siblings. But we're talking and I said, okay, so how does it feel every day when you come to work and you're trying to hit these numbers? And what do? It's tough. Tell me what tough looks like. And they start telling me the story of what tough looks like. So then in that case, I don't have to tell them the impact that innovation can have. They tell me. But they tell me because I was able to ask it in a way that drew out an emotion in them. So there's a lot of time. The legal profession is full of numbers and facts. But if we can stop and say, how does that make you feel? Then that starts to draw out the emotions of a story. So if you think about I go to the gym and lift weights every day. I can tell you all the stats, all the data, all the everything. And if you say to me, Steve, if US Steve says to me, Carla, how does that make you feel? And I'll go, you know what? There's a lot of mornings I don't want to get up and do it. But what I do want to be able to do is hike with my kids when I'm 80 and they're 50. There, I just switch from the facts to the emotion. And now I'm going down the trail of a story. And it's a lot easier to do than we recognize once we understand how to do it. But I don't know if, how often do you and your attorney friends, Steve, sit around and go, how does that make you feel?
Yeah, that would get you that would get you thrown out of the club.
that would make you have to pay the bar bill for sure.
That would get you thrown out of the club. I'm just telling you right now, there might be an ethical rule about expressing how you feel emotionally about anything. We get very uncomfortable around happiness, joy, gratitude. We're okay with misery, but my God, if you get to the other side of that
because misery
spectrum
loves
for
company.
happiness and joy, we're good on the misery scale, but by God, if we start getting happy, we start getting nervous because there's something wrong somewhere. So yeah, so it's important. So Carla, it's hard. I know that I probably won't be able to get you back to the summit. I know I want to work you into the growth AI class structure, and we'll probably only get an hour of your time. But if people want to get your book, if people want to get more Carla thinking, more Carla insight, how could they get more Carla?
The best place to go is my website. It's Carla Johnson, Carla with a C.co. There's no M. I say it's .co for the great state of Colorado because that's where I live. So you can go there. I have a blog. I've been blogging for more than 10 years. So there's all sorts of topics under the sun around innovation, creativity, even marketing, because that's my background, marketing and customer experience, that you can dig through. Another great way is to subscribe to my newsletter, which comes out every other Tuesday. And it's called the Rethink Lab. And in it, I share case studies, stories, tools to help everybody become more innovative thinkers. And one of the things that I include in my newsletter every week, Steve, is something that I call the 7-minute challenge. So back to your point about attorneys don't have time. There's more things to do than there are hours of a day. But in my 7-minute challenge, I give people one simple thing that they can do that takes 7 minutes long to do that will make them a more innovative thinker, just like that. And if you don't have 7 minutes to invest in becoming more innovative as you think, to become more curious about the change that's going on in the world, or how you can become better at running your firm, serving your clients, or if you don't have 7 minutes to become a more creative problem solver, I think you're really doing yourself an incredible, incredible disservice. Because the only way that we're going to be able to not just adapt to AI, but who knows what's down the road with everything that's coming with technology and where AI is going, and much less the world in general, then you're guaranteed to give yourself a death sentence. Because the only constant that we know for sure that we can rely on is change. And the only way we can deal with change is to learn how to become the kind of thinker that can look at what we're doing and understand how to connect the dots and think in a more agile fashion so that we can respond to it. And hopefully not all change will be right in front of us and then one day just come barging through the door and knock it down and we're forced into it. Hopefully, as we learn to become more innovative thinkers, we see that change way ahead of time, and it's more comfortable to sit with the questions. We have the time to go down the rabbit hole, and it's more fun to swap hats and do some of these things. But if we don't allow ourselves the time and space to do it, then we'll never be ready for it.
That's fantastic. Now, how do I subscribe to this newsletter? Because I'm all in, and this is the first time I'm hearing about your newsletter.
If you go to my homepage, if you go to my homepage on my website, you'll see there's a form there, and you can sign up. And another fun thing that you'll see right under the box to subscribe to my newsletter on my homepage is something that I developed when I was writing my book, Rethink Innovation, because people would say, well, I think differently than that. And that's not always how I process ideas or how I share ideas. And so it's a quick 6-question assessment that you can take that shows you what kind of an innovative thinker that you are. And there's 6 different archetypes. And so it's a fun process to go through. You can do it by yourself, you can do it as a team and share results. It's a great exercise to really help understand how you participate in innovative thinking and in creativity, and how you interact with people who are different from you.
Okay, Carla, fantastic. Next question for you. You ready?
Yep.
I would anticipate that you never imagined when you started your career that you would be an innovation architect.
You nailed that.
Yeah, so I imagine that that was not like on the job title like what you're, but you've created this whole role. If you look out for the next, let's just say 10 years, what do you imagine that you'll be doing a decade from now, taking in consideration AI, taking consideration how things are changing what feels like fairly quickly? How do you see your role as a innovation architect shifting, changing? What do you see?
Oh, I let my curiosity lead the way. And I think one of my strengths, Steve, has always been that I never followed a preconceived formula of what my life or my career would look like. So I started out in university as an electrical engineering major. I don't know if I ever shared that with you, because coming from my siblings who are lieutenant colonel in the military, an attorney, a PhD engineer, a software engineer who worked on some of the biggest defense projects in the history of the U.S. That was my sister. Here I come, and I just assumed, well, I'm great at math and science, so I guess this is what I do, even though I was very, very right-brained, very art-oriented, very, very visual. So the first clue that this wasn't my path was the 1.4 GPA I had the first year. But me, being a stubborn one, said, no, I got it in me. I just know. So I stuck it out another year and just went. Like for this, after the first year, I got an invitation I went to the University of Nebraska in Lincoln. They gave me an invitation. They invited me actually to go to the University of Iowa, the University of Colorado, the University of Kansas, any place but the University of Nebraska. But they did let me back in for another year. And that just like really made it clear this was not my calling. And that was when I really let my curiosity lead me. But it was that experience that I had from my engineering classes. And I've always been a bit of a natural writer, that I got my first job at an architecture firm and I did work for them. And that brought me into the world of design architecture, which really was design thinking before IDEO came along and gave it the cool name. I say that design architects are the original design thinkers. And so I really took what I learned from design architects and put that into marketing as my career. So I always thought differently from that vein. And one of the things that I would hear people say, especially after Robert and I wrote our book, is I love the process and I like this stuff. I like everything you're talking about, but I struggle with the ideas. Or people would say, I'm just not a creative person. And I just, in my heart, believe that everybody is, whether they let it out or nourish it or express it or what. And that led me down the rabbit hole of creativity and innovation. And I think even as I go through that, and Rethink Innovation was such a fun book to write, because I talked about the wheel of innovation, which is a 5-step process that teaches people how to consistently come up with those new, great, and reliable ideas. And even halfway through that book, I'm like, thinking down the road, like, what's next? What's next? What's next? And curiosity just naturally came to mind, because so many people would say, I didn't realize how important observation was. And observation is a first step in the wheel of innovation. And I saw this when I spoke at the Atticus Summit. People were saying, like, now I get it. Now I realize when I stop and take that breath, 2 in, 4 out, and I look and I'm aware, like the answers are right in front of me. I've just been on this hamster wheel. I'm so under pressure. I'm so under deadline and stressed. I just couldn't see them. So then that made me think, well, if people aren't being observant, like, why is that? And that kind of took me one step back to really dig into curiosity. And I think curiosity is something that we think, oh, I was curious once, but now I'm an adult and now I do real things. We don't credit curiosity what it deserves.
That was awesome, by the way.
But I went to law school, and so that's, curiosity's all behind me now.
That was awesome. No, you have to do that. You have to do that again, because that was awesome, just for fun. You have to do that again, because that was mocking and fun all at the same time. Do it again.
So as kids, we're real curious, and then we become an adult, and then now we're not, because we have real things to do, and like curiosity is something that kids do. They want to look at a box and they're curious about what it can become, but we don't do that as adults. We're like, I don't have time for that. But I think the reason curiosity doesn't give its credit is because we don't understand how to apply it. So that's like that next step. I think I keep going up the food chain, and I think like already I'm just fascinated with failure. When I think the Rethink Innovation book, the research that I did for that just opened up such a web of curiosities for me. And one of the people I met along the way is Dr. Samuel West, who designed a traveling museum exhibit called the Museum of Failure. And he really looked into failure and what it means. Now, in the legal profession, I'm sure there's some people who are really doing that, shallow, quick breathing right now when we talk about failure. But I think it's how we position failure. And failure doesn't have to mean disaster. And I think me and my 1.4 GPA, if I had looked at that as a complete and utter disaster, which I'm sure my parents did, I really looked at it. Well, this is something that is showing me a direction. And if I'm curious enough about it and can learn from it, it doesn't have to be a failure. It can be this incredible learning. And that is a completely different shift in how, when something we believe we want and have worked toward in life doesn't turn out the way we think it is, we see it as complete and utter failure. And for a lot of people, that really shuts down what they accomplish in life. But if we can step back and be a little curious about it, why did I fail? Like, what were my expectations versus what were my actions versus what were my outcomes? It changes everything. And I think it also helps us bring out some vulnerability that again goes back to that human connection. And I think the more we can have any kind of a human connection, whether it's with each other or understanding how to support that human connection through AI or tools or whatever it is, I think the more joy we have in our work. And I think if we can't go to work every day and have joy either in the work that we do, or the people that we help, or the things, the projects, the missions that we're supporting, why is it that we do what we do? So that was probably a way longer answer to your question than you ever imagined, Steve.
Well, the question was, I'm going to make sure I got it. So you're like, look, when I had this experience that some people might interpret as failure, but you interpret it as being educated, like I don't belong in this field, electrical engineering, you allowed kind of curiosity to guide you. And so my anticipation is the next decade, you're going to allow curiosity to guide you again.
Yeah, it'll be curiosity on a lot of subjects. So a lot, curiosity itself, curiosity around failure. I think curiosity about how do we bring more joy and playfulness and maybe even silliness to our work in a way that feels concrete, intangible, and still productive. Because there's a lot of part about this front end fueling to innovation and creativity that can feel frivolous, I think, if it's not done right, or if we don't understand, back to your earlier point about how do we turn it into action. Because I am a realist. I'm back to that new, great, and reliable. We're heavy on reliable. We have to make sure that some of these things, while they may seem that we're doing them for the sake of doing them, that ultimately lead to an outcome. I am a realist. I am a business owner. I understand P&L. I understand revenue. I understand we have to make this company work. And so I just believe there's a different route that we can use to get there that sometimes people don't give credit to because they don't understand how to get the tangible outcomes out of this alternative route.
I like it. I'm going to give the lawyers and their teams a quick tip. I don't know, you can comment on this quick tip. It goes back to your hat switching idea. As a lawyer, failure sometimes means a client goes to jail. Sometimes it means a jury returns a negative verdict for your client. They don't get the recovery you believe they deserve. A failure may be that you selected a bad case and took a bad case to trial and it didn't go the way you wanted. Maybe that you made a bad hire. But one of the big distinctions, I'm going back to your hat switching ideas. I try and tell lawyers, when you think about failure, you've got to switch out your hats. As a lawyer, you're going to do everything you can to help your client achieve the outcome that you were hired or retained to do. That's your commitment. But when it comes to your business, you want to take your lawyer hat off and put the business owner hat on. And that's where you can experiment and be comfortable with failure. And it's one of the biggest things I had to do. It's one of the biggest things I had to do with my team. It's one of the biggest things I have to do now. I have to remind our team, is like, look, if Elon Musk can blow up $100 million rocket to see if it works, we can take some risks and allow things to fail in our organization. It's totally okay. But people get stressed, they get uptight, they get worried about it. So as a lawyer, I have to keep in mind that sometimes my failure has negative consequences. And it may not be really that I failed, it may be a bad case. But when it comes to my business, failure is an investment in greater success and in innovation and in learning. So that's just a tip. And I don't know if you got any thoughts about that. I know your brother's a lawyer, but what are your thoughts about that? It's just the model.
You hit something so important here, Steve. And I think that hat swapping into a business owner, I know when I started to think of my business like that, it changed everything for me, because then it wasn't about my failure. It was about the failure of the business. And it took a lot of that emotion out of it and made it more objective. So then when something didn't go the way I expected or hoped, I was more objective of looking at, why didn't it? And I think when we look at it as a business owner, and like, I love the book Profit First. And when we start to think in different ways and we look at it from a different perspective, you can miss some of those numbers in small increments because you try things and it's not complete and utter disaster. But it might be the one thing that you learned from that failure that helps you understand something else that you may have never considered. That's now an option that can lead to a major success. And I think especially as we look at the talent pool and what a new generation of attorneys is like coming into the work world, their whole dynamics of what they're willing to do and hours they're willing to work may be very, very different. And I think unless we're willing to try some things, and not everything is going to work, and experience some of those failures and learn from it, I think we're going to have a hard time with firms putting together these multi-generational teams and making them really successful, whether it's for a business or ultimately serving those clients and hopefully getting the kind of outcomes that we want for our clients.
I think you nailed a big issue there, which probably be a whole podcast unto itself. But that's probably a big challenge for a lot of lawyers right now, is trying to figure out how to grow with the generational differences and the different prioritization that they're seeing in the marketplace from new team members or interested team members. All right, Carla, as we start to wrap up, any last words of advice about thinking about AI?
I think my biggest piece of advice is try it every chance you can in every different kind of situation, because I think the way you realize the potential of anything is to push your own comfort zone. And I think there's a huge area of discomfort with it, but the only way that we're really going to adapt it and realize its whole potential is for us to be creative about what's possible.
I love it. All right, Carla, thank you for being here. Thanks for your brilliance. Every time I talk to you, I learn something. I have a good laugh and I have a great time. And I just want to say thanks. Thanks for everything that you're doing for our community and the contribution that you made today. So thank you very much.
Absolutely. Always a pleasure to spend time with you, Steve, and another great conversation. I really enjoyed it.
Thanks for joining this week's episode of Great Practice, Great Life. Please tune in weekly to get the next episode. If you enjoyed the episode, please subscribe, like, and don't hesitate to share it with a friend who you think this episode could help. With that, thanks, and I hope you enjoy next week's episode.